So, in part one of this series, we left our hero, K. Carl Smith, standing in virtual silence as white separatist Scott Terry asks why America can't just go back to the times of racial segregation.
My problem is, why can't we be more like Booker T. Washington Republicans and his famous statement that let's be unified like a hand, but separate like a finger?
Okay. If you haven't seen it, I highly encourage you to watch it. An awful lot of you on Twitter and Facebook seemed surprised by the CPAC video, but it was merely an extension of the hatchet jobs by black conservatives every day on the major networks. As I said previously, it is my belief that this session at the Conservative Political Action Convention perfectly captures the mission of the public black conservative in American politics. They're the ones you see on TV, the ones that give the speeches, that write the books. They're the ones that theoretically want to recruit more blacks to the GOP or conservatism, but actually rarely speak to black people and spend most of their time talking to white audiences about black people, when they aren't being trotted out to co-sign the outrageous antics or comments or policies of other conservatives. In part two, we're going to turn our attention to how this particular black conservative went after the one non-conservative black woman in the room, despite people just like her being the very subject of the session itself, while allowing the one certain racist in the room to say his piece. My major point here is that the idea that black Republicans exist to advance minority outreach is a conceit. What better proof of that can there be than witnessing black conservatives shouting down a black woman at an information session, a training, if you will, about how to attract black people to conservatism? The presenter is there to sell his Frederick Douglass system. CPAC has allowed him to be there because his system confirms many of the tropes of conservatism. And many of the people there are clearly trying to learn how not to be called racist, not actually how not to be one. So let's get started. Personally, I find Terry largely uninteresting. There are lots of racists and separatists in America. But I believe his invoking of black icon Booker T. Washington is telling. Terry admits to his own racist segregationist views and then points to a black person as a defense for them. By repeating what this black man said about racial segregation, even though it was 100 plus years ago, he legitimizes his own statement, and modern black conservatives are used in exactly the same way. The only difference being that Washington said it to help black people, and modern black conservatives say it to help themselves. In fact, Terry used this technique on Smith again in the session, only this time it was Smith's own words that were used against him. Remember this?
He escaped from slavery at the age of 20. What did he escape from? Slave master run healthcare. He escaped from slave master entitlements. He escaped from slave master welfare program. Douglass was a 47%.
Later, Terry asks, but what about Booker T. Washington's comments on unity and diversity? Terry's focus is obviously not on the unity part, but on the separate part. So Smith starts talking about how Frederick Douglass wrote his master, telling him that he forgave him, even after all that his master had done to him.
Douglass talked about that. Here's an example. Here's an example. When Douglass escaped from slavery, I think 10 years or 20 years after he escaped from slavery, he writes a letter to his former slave master and said, I forgive you for all the things you did to me.
Forgiving him shelter, food, all those
No.
Did you catch that? When Smith suggests that slavery was something through which Douglass had suffered, and for which his master should hope to be forgiven, Terry immediately wonders why the slave master needs forgiveness at all, since, as Smith has said, slavery provided slaves with free food, shelter, and health care. Smith, the presenter, giggles nervously. In fact, he can't stop a smiling and a grinning. He will later claim that he didn't answer because the crowd didn't give him a chance, so eager were they to tear Terry to shreds. So let's listen again.
For all the things you did to me.
Forgiving him shelter, food, all those
No. Listen, wait a minute now.
I'm serious.
Wait now. You just said Wait, sir. Let me be honest. Let me address your first question. Yes, let me address the first question. We're going to move on.
I'll let people throw stuff.
Well,
There is laughter and murmuring. But the only voice I hear in that room taking issue with Terry is Kim Brown. At one point, she says to Terry, slavery was not a benefit to black people. To which Terry replies, that's your opinion. And apparently, it's K. Carl Smith's opinion too, because he doesn't respond to that either. But really, I think Smith does not respond because it's not his job to respond. He introduced this entire line of thought. He'd spent a portion of his talk equating slavery with welfare, with handouts. Slave master run health care is Obamacare. Slave master entitlements are food stamps and free housing, etc. All Terry did was feed his own words back to him. What could Smith say? But let's go back to the crowd. Doesn't sound like the audience took care of it to me. And it's not that they weren't capable. Let's take a listen at what happens during the question and answer period, when Kim Brown stands to address the cowardly nonsense coming from the front of the room.
Let me tell you guys something. These gentlemen are being extremely disingenuous with
Wait,
you.
time out.
I'm gonna tell you.
Wait, time out, man. Time out. Sure. You said you have a question. That's the statement. You're not
Whoa, who was that other guy? Because that guy knows how to take offense. That was Carney Smith, K. Carl's brother. He wasn't waiting for any damn crowd to address anything. He was on it. And wow, just listen to that crowd. They're hooting, they're hollering, they're clapping. Now, that's a crowd that can be depended on to address what matters to them. Let's listen some more.
Sir, let me be clear.
Let someone else speak.
Hold on, excuse me.
Let someone else speak.
Let
someone else speak.
Ma'am,
you're disrupting me.
Sir, I'd like
Let
to
someone
ask a
else speak.
question.
You've asked questions.
No, I haven't. May I please ask a
You're
question?
disrupting this. Let someone else
May
speak.
I please ask a question? May I ask a question? I'd like to ask a question.
Let someone else ask
We got a
it.
question right here.
You guys didn't allow me to
We'll talk
ask my
outside. We
question.
got a question right here.
Finally, she gets the question out. Over the protest of several people.
I mean, you guys don't want to hear. My question is, why don't we hear repudiation from the right when there are racist statements being made?
It worked both ways. Let me give you a perfect example. It worked both ways. Back in 2004,
But I'm asking you about the Republicans, sir. Okay, go
it worked both
ahead.
ways. I agree with you saying that. It's about principles. If they did it, they're wrong.
Here's my point. K. Carl Smith and other public black conservatives like him are exactly the kind of people that black people think they are. To get in good with conservatives, K. Carl Smith is willing to defame Frederick Douglass, equate slavery with welfare, and entertain arguments for reintroducing segregation. He's even willing to allow, and even participate in, the shouting down of the one black person in the room whose greatest sin is criticizing conservatives. A greater sin than those of an open racist. So let me answer your question, Kim. Why don't we hear repudiation from the right when there are racist statements being made? All we have to do is look at this session. It's because the right at best tolerates racists, at worst agrees with them, and always, above all, has a whole cadre of black conservatives patting them on the back and whispering in their ears words of reassurance and encouragement. It's not you, it's them, those blacks. They're the real racists. See, there is no minority outreach. For the GOP, the issue isn't really we don't have enough minority support, but rather the Democrats have too much minority support. The first can only be fixed by building relationships in the black community, as I've heard one of the few decent black Republicans that I know of say. The second only requires tearing down, and that's much easier. So enter voter suppression and gerrymandering. But black Republicans aren't needed for that. They're needed for the optics, for appearances, to make the hesitant, the moderate, the decent, the average American feel good about voting for the GOP. about sending the Republican Party their campaign contributions, about the time they spend volunteering. After all, there are black people that agree with the Republican Party, right? There are black people that say that black Democrats are brainwashed, that they're greedy, that they're selfish, that they're lazy. So it's okay for me to support the party, right? Again, absolutely nothing in that presentation would help anyone recruit blacks to conservatism. So, either the conservative power structure doesn't understand that insulting your prospects is not a good strategy, or it was meant for someone else. It has to be asked, how many blacks are turned off from conservatism, from the Republican Party, by the shameful behavior of K. Carl Smith Republicans? How many conservatives hold the wrong-headed positions they do, at least in part, because of the encouragement of such black conservatives? In part 3, we're going to look at the aftermath of this event and see how liberal black people somehow managed to be responsible for ruining it, not the black conservatives that ran it or the racists that attended it. We'll see how events are described when K. Carl Smith thinks you haven't seen the tape. So until we meet again, please don't forget to rate and comment on this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to this channel. Because really, it's the only way that I know you're paying attention. And remember, a black conservative trying to recruit a black person is like a lamb chop trying to recruit a lamb.